trying to get you folks to understand this is how the smoke and mirrors works. I just simply want to find out what happened to the American dream as someone who is living the American nightmare. You got to know the facts, and if we came together, we could overcome the corruption that's murdering us all.
I'm just trying to make the world aware of the truth, and I've got it.
And it's a Saturday, and no remarkable college football games today, so I can't really take a reprieve of where my head is and disappear into the gridiron battles and take enjoyment and a slight sort of disconnect from reality to look at great games and triumphs and all of those storylines that happen every Saturday. There'll be those, but it's unremarkable today. And it was interesting, and I'm feeling kind of in a blasé mood because today is the 11th anniversary of the day that my partner Eric and I got on the road to make our first film, Forward 13, which then led to the con. And I had gotten to the point to be able to do that because I had been ground down in hell after the 2008 great financial crisis, where I was literally, on the precipice at that moment on September 15th, 2008, where I was about to realize a deal that would have taken me to the next level. But my partner at the time, who had agreed to, the terms and was about to sign the contracts to get us to the next level, suddenly started going upside down because of the collapse on Wall Street. And he was a big developer at the time, and like all developers are tied in one form or another to financing, and that financing dried up just like it did for everybody else. And that sent me into disarray that led to the moment where I had incredible optimism because there was a movement that started called Occupy Wall Street. And one thing led to another, the planets aligned, and I was able to realize after a miracle funding to go out and try to figure out what was going on. And my premise the whole time was, well, as somebody who was representative of, let's say, the previously once upwardly mobile middle class, and somebody who really, in a deep, deep, deep sort of soulful way, used the theory, I suppose, the ideology of the American dream to guide me. I always felt like everything was potentially able to be overcome. And if you just put in the work and the effort and you figure stuff out, great things happen. And so I was incredibly optimistic when we set sail, literally, on this adventure, where I had to, for myself, try to find answers to things that didn't make sense. And to put that into perspective, literally 11 years after that journey began, and as much as I have the answers to what it was that I had sought out to try to obtain, I still haven't been able to put it all together because of just the grand chokehold this invisible force of deception and corruption has on literally everything. And and I'm looking back and I'm asking myself, well, what have I learned on this journey? What have I learned on this grand journey? I've learned that the truth has no value. I was reminded of this morning because I just happened to, come across some YouTube interviews that popped up in my algorithms that came out a couple of years ago. And just because and we all know this, right? If you get into certain music, or if you follow your favorite dancing dog or some beautiful girl, or, some party scene or whatever, you're going to get more and more of the same. And so because I happen to be pretty obsessed with financial corruption, one of the great editors, writers, researchers of our time, a guy from the New York Times by the name of David Einrich, popped up on my feed this morning, and he was talking about his book, Dark Towers, which is kind of a deep dive on Deutsche Bank and really Donald Trump's association with it. And I was listening to this, and I was like, oh my God. I mean, the amount of information that we knew about Donald Trump going back to, the late 90s, really the 80s, but the late 90s, the early aughts, Trump wasn't deceptive in hiding his criminal agenda. I mean, he was telling junk bond lenders that he was going to default on his loans. That was his business model. And yet he still got loans. Now, how and why he got those loans under these certain circumstances, it was interesting because the author of this really didn't understand control fraud. And I just actually sent him an email of one of our microdocs that we put on our website, and to teach him about control fraud, which is part of one of the many miracles that I experienced on this 11-year journey, at least from the beginning, of actually being able to have a budget to go investigate these types of things. I was able to understand that everything emanates from what's called control fraud. Anyway, the point that I'm making now is that Donald Trump ends up by lying, grifting his way to celebrity, grifting his way to realized money from fraudulent loans and all sorts of insane tactics, ultimately leads this guy to the presidency of the United States and all the madness that we're in the meantime. And then it's been revealed recently, like over the course of the last, several months, that Alex Jones, I mean, I always thought Alex Jones made a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I never was naive enough to think that guy didn't have a pretty significant channel of revenue with InfoWars and all the rest of it with his, survival vitamins and whatever else he was pawning. But I was shocked to find out it was $50 to $70 million a year. $50 to $70 million a year lying about children being slaughtered at Sandy Hook. I mean, this sort of situation with Trump and Jones and so many others is just grotesque. It's animalistic. It's a descent into madness. And, further to that, I mean, the entire Republican Party is just insane. And the corruption and the lies and the deception. And so who am I to be talking about those guys? Because everybody's like, what aboutism, right? Well, no, of course. As I've told everybody over the course of time, I mean, the biggest lie of them all came from President Barack Obama when he went on 60 Minutes and said that, what Wall Street did, as unethical as it was, didn't rise to the level of criminal behavior, that it was shenanigans, or, that it was, some of it wasn't illegal, as you put it. Fucking insane and bullshit and crazy. And I look back at this time period and I can't believe how, on the one hand, I'm so incredibly inspired because if I didn't go on this journey, I would never have known of all of the courageous people in the pipeline, the whistleblowers who put their entire careers on the line to make those that should have been able to do something about the criminal rot that was happening within this insane crime pipeline, to investigate it and to bring it to an end. But ultimately, the bad guys always won and continue to win. The bad guys continue to find ways to isolate the truth, basically water it down, get it hidden, and then blame, the circumstances on a whole bunch of other factors that are ridiculous. And the worst part of it is most of that's coming from the professionals within the systems. Like I've said before, the greatest betrayal ultimately has come from the professionals that we depend on to do their jobs and to do them right within the institutions of power, particularly as it relates to justice. So the Department of Justice, as I've mentioned recently, is doing as it appears to be doing its job, and it's ironic as hell that this second-rate, Trump-appointed judge is able to muck up, at least briefly, this investigation, everything that's into the supposed, top-secret documents out of Mar-a-Lago and everything that is in the mix on, bringing down the wood on Trump. But, just yet another example of ridiculousness. I mean, just this part of it alone, to me, is small potatoes. I mean, like I said at the outset, the stuff that Trump has been involved with grifting and lying and deception and thieving and, all of these things have been rewarded the whole time. The lesson is, and I think most of us know are aware and are probably sickened by, this massive Grand Canyon of justice. So, an innocent person could be put away for decades if they have to depend on the state to defend them. Meanwhile, a guy like Trump, who's worth monumentally less than he told us, can still afford enough attorneys to be able to muck up the system and kind of stay ahead of the game and never go down or get torpedoed for just insane amounts of crime. And I remember watching this video earlier today, this interview with David Heinrich, and even him, and this is part of the biggest problem, particularly from media, is a guy who knows Trump and Deutsche Bank inside and out, couldn't go so far as to actually make a connection. In fact, he was rather bold in his proclamation that there was no evidence of collusion between Deutsche Bank and Putin's influence in whatever manifested Trump loans. But meanwhile, he explains that Deutsche Bank, a German bank, had been involved with money laundering for Russia from the beginning of time. I mean, at least going back to the early 1900s. They've been, laundering Russian money, into the West for a lot of, I guess, investment opportunity purposes to try to grow money in a way that, made sense in a variety of ways. And it's not, about doing the deep dive analysis on that at the moment, as it is just the reflection that it's absolutely clear that there was nothing hidden or a mystery about Deutsche Bank working with Russia and Putin specifically. But there's no causality connection to Trump and getting billions of dollars of loans from Deutsche Bank when supposedly nobody else would lend to him. Okay, whatever. But it's also part of control fraud, and it's also part of a bunch of other things that led to deceptive acts and practices by the Trump organization, and not to mention, of course, all of the other felonies that were involved from tax evasion, among others, right? But it's the control fraud, at least on the financial side, and potentially civil and criminal side. But it's just, again, the bigger point for me in this lesson of an 11-year journey where I'm trying to find purpose. I'm trying to find, some sort of like deep, soulful connection to the outcome doesn't matter. That the journey is what it's all about. And, I got all the answers I was looking for. But it's not enough. I'm talking to a lot of people that are like, okay, they don't want to know about bad news. They don't want to know about details. They don't want to know about what, is the umbrella and the tumor and the poison and the deception and the griftopia that goes into the most ridiculous gymnastics of bullshit I can ever imagine. And I wouldn't know the details if I hadn't gone on this journey. I mean, it never ends. But what you come down to understand is that is God and money the same thing? And think about that. I mean, God is what? I mean, it's just this invisible force that supposedly knows everything, that is supposed to be a moral guide that's going to have some kind of consequences, for everyone, regardless of their structure. And one of the craziest things in Western Christianity that I've always found problematic is you could go and confess and pay a tithing and you can be forgiven, and that really originates with the notion of Yom Kippur in Judaism, to ask God forgiveness for your sins. We're all supposed to be forgiven for our sins. And so if you're forgiven, then you can destroy people, you can lie, you can deceive, you can steal, you can do whatever you want. And then in the end, what? God's supposed to forgive that? What happened to the Old Testament God, the God where there's damnation and there's like consequences, right? Well, I mean, if you look around, and same with money, right? So, I mean, based on that, sort of construction, it's hard not to think, well, wait a second, have we all been deceived? Is God deception? Because Just look around at what's incentivized and what's rewarded. Just look at Trump. Trump's a con artist, thieving, deceptive con artist villain that rose to become president to create a coup d'etat, a white supremacist coup d'etat. But he would never have gotten there had the financial system not completely pulverized the world and gotten away with it, because they're above the law. They make the law. They can make money out of thin air. So what is money? It's a creation that can be literally manifested out of thin air. But based on what? The full faith and credit of the United States. Based on what? Commodities, natural resources, productive capacity, empire, all of these things that are very real. But at the same time, I mean, in the short term, you've got poverty. You've got people on the streets. You've got people that, are just grinding to try to survive, to keep their lips above water, to try to, do the right things. And a lot of them need faith for guidance. They've got to have a belief. They've got to have a spiritual sort of undertaking that's like everything will be rewarded in the end. Really? I can't. I mean, I'm a guy who needs tangible evidence of everything. Okay? Do I think it's great to have faith in yourself and faith in hopefully things to come together and faith that the right will win in the long run? Absolutely. There's no question about it. I mean, I think it's necessary for survival. It's interesting too. Like I was just doing some high school history work with my son, kind of helping him out, and I was relearning certain things that I had forgotten about in terms of frontiersmen in the Wild West and all of the different kind of difficult things that we have to consider, in 2022 that maybe we didn't consider in, let's say the 1840s, right? But I was just studying some stuff about Kit Carson, this frontiersman who left home at 16 and he goes to the West and he ends up becoming this fur trader. And then he ends up becoming, somebody who's with the Indians, and he becomes then an explorer with the army. And he just lived this extraordinary life that just never ended. I mean, well, what am I saying? The adventure never ended. And he just kept finding himself in more and more situations and predicaments, and a lot of times he overcame, a lot of those things, and he became kind of mythical, the mythical frontiersman that represented the West, for better or for worse. And but at the same time, all of his exploits that led to that myth were real. That he just freaking went with the grind, he went with the river, he just fucking did what was going on right in front of him. And I'm sure there was both plenty of good and bad. And, I will say that Kit Carson, I found out that he fought with the North against the Confederates using, Mexicans turned Americans because of what happened after the Mexican-American War that led to the Civil War. But anyway, that I found fascinating. And life is always a balance, right? There's always good and bad, and nobody's perfect, and we're all flawed. But this is insanity, what we're in the midst of. There are millions upon millions of people out there that supposedly go to church week in and week out. They'll literally think a guy like Trump, who did what? I mean, all of the stuff he did with, Stormy Daniels, or grab him by the pussy, or lie about all of the businesses that he put together and the predation. This is what became president, to then become involved with whatever you want to transpose January 6th meaning. But I mean, that's kind of like, I don't know, that's like what, the fourth chapter, the fourth episode of what's been going on since 2000 or before. I mean, think about it. 9/11 happened. Saudi Arabia is still walking around like they own the world. And we've allowed that to happen because those that are at the apex of our financial structure play ball, which fuels our military industrial complex and our fossil fuel complex. And that's what has complete control. And those institutions and others are above the law, completely above the law. As I've demonstrated over and over and over, after the great financial crisis and everything that we put together for you, every detail that leads to the largest criminal conspiracy and cover-up in history circles back to Federal Reserve Act 13.3. That is there for a purpose, to save the United States and become the lender of last resort under emergency circumstances, and it makes a lot of sense, but it's not there to guarantee with the full faith and credit of the United States shadow banks that were involved with massive, massive fraud. And that's what we did. So you've got 9/11 went un, you know, unpunished, unmitigated, undealt with, the no truth. I mean, it just fucking duck dive and deception, and we wind up in Iraq, and millions of people, die in the long run that had nothing to do with 9/11. And a lot of people profited immensely from it. That's 20 years in the making. 2008. All of these incredible deceptive machines created trillions of dollars of illegal fees, looted the country, raped the country, destroyed millions of Americans, and are above the law. Then we have this disgruntled sort of population, the white, working class that, joins with a lot of the more angry extreme versions of the white right, I guess. And we wind up with an insurrection and whatever this Confederate movement is. But it's really gross. The whole thing's fucking gross. What have I learned? Again, sorry to beat down the point in my journey to the heart of darkness. And I'm an optimistic guy. But I've learned that the truth has no value. God is dead. The American dream is dead. The Constitution is dead. And you're not going to do anything about it. I've been talking to these smart guys that have been around in activism for a long time, and they are aware of a lot of the stuff. They don't know the details, but they're smart, much smarter than I am, but still they don't know the details because they didn't go on this journey. And because it's difficult to absorb and stomach, they don't necessarily want to go on the journey, right? Everybody knows everything. In fact, one of them said, you've got to con people into understanding the con. Give them free pizza and dope. It's easier to just give them fucking, what did the Jonestown Massacre? They handed out poison, psilocybin, not psilocybin, what am I talking about? Some kind of some kind of poison where everybody, they committed suicide. What is life worth living for when everything, the principles of this nation, can't be defended with absolute certainty because the truth is black and white? And then we find excuse after excuse. Well, people are too busy. They're just trying to survive. They've got too much information. There's distortion. There's just nothing but lies. Like I say it over and over and over, man. Mainstream media, Rachel Maddow, Tucker Carlson, Anderson Cooper get paid millions of dollars to make sure you don't understand how this system operates. And then you got a bunch of guys chasing algorithms and audience share to give you their reaction to what's going on in their typically humorous ways, whether it's Joe Rogan or Jimmy Dore or Russell Brand, all the comedians, which I enjoy, but they don't know any of this stuff. And I've tried to get them the information. They don't want to know it. Nobody wants to understand the easiest things to comprehend and understand. Maybe it's because they're not delivering it, I guess. I don't know. I don't know why I'm even trying to connect with anyone. Maybe this is just mental masturbation on an anniversary where I feel really discouraged. I've spent millions of dollars and years traversing this country with great expense and sacrifice to get the truth, and the truth doesn't mean a goddamn fucking thing. It doesn't mean anything. The integrity of law doesn't mean anything. The value of money, the value of hard work, the value of supply and demand, the freedom of choice, the freedom of energy, the freedom to be informed, none of that shit matters. We're too fractured. This machine of evil requires your complicity, your ignorance, your cowardice. It demands your loyalty to lies. Which means that none of you give a flying fuck about democracy. None of you give a flying fuck about the rule of law. Nobody out there, none of you gives a flying fuck about right and wrong. None of you gives a flying fuck about dignity or integrity or truth or justice in the American way. And I thought I really, really deeply cared about all of it. I do internally, but it just means nothing. And I keep coming back to this sort of configuration in my mind. When nothing means anything to you, you mean nothing. I mean, how much do we have to continue to try to wake you up to the reality of this insane ocean of madness and lies that you're all a part of? Now, I've said it a million times. There's a lot of innocent people out there that work hard, that have, found success, that deserve success, that get a lot of other success from this system, that didn't partake in all of its maneuverings of deception. And I think if they had millions of people that stood up to this, they'd be a part of it too. But they don't have time to go out and create a movement. They don't have time to go out and find the truth. They're too busy saving lives or building homes or, finding cures for diseases or whatever. There's still plenty of good people that operate in the system in a way that does make sense. And I'm glad for them. I really am. I'm glad for anybody who finds solace or, comfort and degrees of success that they've earned. I think that's the most important thing that exists. But the rest of it's an illusion. We're all complicit when we don't challenge this system of giving it our tacit approval. I mean, what's that line that says something like, evil flourishes when good men do nothing? It's all fucking cliche, right? There's always battles throughout history, and there's been good wars that have been won, and nothing's ever perfect. But I mean, how much are you going to endure? How long are you going to remain silent in the overwhelming evidence of this evil that has complete control? I'd say for the top 5%, you're going to do it as long as you get paid to do it, and as long as you don't have to fucking deal with it. For the rest of you, you don't have a choice. But then when you're on your heels, you're too weak to be able to fight. There's only one way this happens, is that if everybody gets on the same page and understands how it all works. And this isn't rocket science, it's racketeering. This isn't ethereal. This isn't philosophy. It's nuts and bolts, fucking black and white. Crime. Adolf Hitler rose to power because he was completely ambitious. He understood the psychology of the German people from a standpoint that he knew that they were all collectively suffering. And Adolf Hitler existed before the Great Depression, but it wasn't until the Great Depression that Adolf Hitler really got a second chance to become what Adolf Hitler became. And Adolf Hitler didn't have all the answers. He just had a whole lot of suspicions and speculations about things that had led to the demise of, the fatherland. But he was incredibly committed to making sure that those that were on the downside were going to rise up, and they were going to murder everybody in their way to get what they wanted. And they did. And that's all they did. The entire machine was built on murdering everyone. And when they murdered this rung of people, they went to that rung of people, and so on and so forth, until Hitler just bit off more than he could chew. And he got his ass kicked, in Russia, and he got his ass kicked on the Western Front by the Allies, eventually, because he got completely overextended. But one day, something like that could happen to us. I don't know if it's going to happen from fascism. I just think that in 2022, the big construction is that fossil fuel controls global economies, that democracy is a myth, that we know that this system is unsustainable. It's already murdered millions of people. It could have been stopped a long time ago. We could have transitioned out of this a long time ago. But those of us that believe that a new world is possible and that change is possible, that we're not organized enough to overcome the machine that this evil incarnate of financialization that has complete control of the world. Because most people will work for who they're getting paid by, and they're not going to ask questions. I don't know, man. Just me ranting about fucking bullshit because it doesn't fucking matter anyway. Fuck it. I just made a promise to myself that I was going to find the answers.